Okay, what the hell happened there? Before we start, I'll just try to recap on the off chance you haven't seen it yet. Last night on SmackDown, Charlotte, in an unannounced match, dethroned Asuka as the WWE SmackDown Women's Champion. That is the same Charlotte who, in less than a fortnight's time, is going to challenge for the Raw Women's Championship in the main event of WrestleMania. So, and should also point out, at the time of me recording this, WWE have said the square root of nothing about this match now being to unify the two women's belts. So it's just 3 people competing for the Raw Women's Championship, one of which will now be the SmackDown Women's Championship, which will not be defended. There's a lot to go through with this. There is a lot to go through with this because on the face of it, it's a booking decision that is as mystifying as it is counterproductive. But one thing I will point out is that for about the last month now, I have been saying this. Such is the deserving level of focus on the Raw Women's Championship match between Becky, Ronda and Charlotte, we presume that his blue brand counterpart has become, well, something of an afterthought in the whole process. Okay, so why have they done this? Well, the first thing I think it's important to point out is the sheer actual quality of the match we got last night. Charlotte Flair versus Asuka was easily one of the best crafted TV offerings we've had at least this year, probably even longer. It was wrestled with creativity, it was wrestled viciously, there was pacing, there was escalation. By the finishing sequence, they were both in each other's faces screaming in pain. They really put over exactly what this meant to them, what it meant for the belt, what it meant for the occasion. It was just, we should find all of that very reassuring. See, right, in principle, it should matter that WWE always neglects the logic and the consistency when they're trying to tell us these stories. But what last night does remind us is that in the actual execution, it doesn't really matter all that much. Like last year, for example, Asuka was on this huge hot streak going into WrestleMania, then she lost to Charlotte, then she lost to Carmella, she kind of got done in by Ellsworth and they buried her, but then when she won that blow-away TLC main event to win the belt, kind of all didn't really matter, did it? Like the only thing you can remember about Asuka last year is the Royal Rumble win and her holding that belt in December. It shouldn't be all you remember, but it is. And what that tells us is that WWE's hyper-impulsive, not really well thought out booking strategy has reached something of a tipping point. So long as you stop trying to apply the old rules, stop trying to apply the old conventions, the talented, very, very talented roster can just sort of make it work. The point I'm trying to make with this is that by forcing us to file a new complaint in that, oh my god, what are they doing with Asuka, WWE have actually addressed the bigger one we've had for a number of weeks. A lot of people on the internet have been really annoyed that they're shoehorning Charlotte Flair into the Becky versus Ronda match at WrestleMania because they don't see what she adds to it. They don't see what she's bringing to the table. But last night should have shown you categorically, once and for all, that the reason she is in that match is to improve the quality of it. Like, I know I always make jokes about this, but I am genuinely a massive, massive Becky Lynch fan. I think Ronda has had probably the greatest debut yet of anybody I've seen in recent memory, but still, I think Charlotte should be in that match because out of the 3 of them, she is the best wrestler. Like, compare Charlotte versus Asuka last night to what we got between Becky and Asuka at the Royal Rumble. Which told the better story in the ring, which had the better moments, which felt like a main event match. But that's all bargaining on my point, I suppose. Charlotte was already in the WrestleMania main event. She was already in that match. They didn't need to jump her through a hoop or do anything with her to get her in there. So why? What is the real reason why Charlotte has just dethroned Asuka for the SmackDown Women's Championship? Well, it's not great. Okay, so fact number 1, bottom line. Last night, Asuka had a better match, a more complete match, a more engaging, a more compelling, a more vicious, more brutal, a better wrestling match last night with Charlotte than she could ever possibly have had on April the 7th. And that plays a huge role in WWE's decision to make that shocking decision. Let's go through all the permutations of what she could have been doing at WrestleMania if she still had the title, and it will all become slightly obvious. I think if you'd asked us to speculate on what was going to happen, we were going to get Asuka versus Sonya Deville versus Mandy Rose, and straight up, that is not a match worthy of WrestleMania. It could be, don't get me wrong, the talent is there for it to work, but they have hastily rushed through the Absolution build-up, and it would have just been a triple threat match that was all about the 2 of them, not about the women's champion, and it would have just been consigned to the kickoff show or else given the death spot. That's all that would have been. And the same is true of Asuka versus Naomi, which I think was everybody's everybody's second pick, wasn't it? Because Naomi's an experienced talent, she's a good worker, she's had the belt before, but there's no story there whatsoever. And simply saying that Naomi isn't green and she's maybe a bit more marketable than the other two is not a sales pitch for a WrestleMania match. And I mean, if you'd like to look beyond SmackDown for an opponent, because WWE seems to have forgotten about the whole brand split thing this WrestleMania season, so we might as well. There's still not all that much. I think Ruby Riott is maybe the exceptional candidate, but I mean, she is overlooked. Yes, she's way better than she's given credit for, but she's just another body on Raw, isn't she? She's not really sort of main event caliber. And as the leader of the Riott Squad, who are way more eager to impress than they are actually impressive, that also rules out Liv Morgan and Sarah Logan. Then, of course, there was WWE's decision to hastily rush through the introduction of the Women's Tag Team Championship. And obviously the quality of the doubles field, admittedly a bit hit and miss, has severely limited the quality of the singles field. Because, I mean, think about it. We could have had Asuka versus Bayley, which would have been great. We could have had Asuka versus Sasha Banks, which would have been great. And we could have had Asuka versus Nia, which would have been... Now, I want to just cut through here a second to say one thing. None of this excuses the lack of a SmackDown Women's Championship match. They have had months since Asuka won that belt to try and come up with something, but while it doesn't excuse it, it does explain it. WrestleMania 35 is a night in which they want to make history for the women's division, and having a very poor middling championship match somewhere on that card doesn't do that. It only exposes the flaws. And this leads us to the additional and the primary reason why they made that decision last night. Like, Paul Heyman is not on WWE's creative team. He does a lot of the writing, yes, but he's not part of the creative team. However, they do seem to have borrowed his old mantra from ECW, and that is, where possible, always accentuate the positives and do what you can to disguise the negatives. We complain, and I could just be talking about the channel, but I do mean pretty much everybody who watches WWE. We all complain about this 50-50 booking they do. Sometimes it's long-term 50-50 booking, sometimes it's short-term 50-50 booking, but it's left us with a roster that is, by and large, with a few exceptions at the top and the bottom, largely indistinguishable from itself. People always say wins and losses don't matter anymore, and that's why. The thing is, there are now no true and stable tiers left in WWE's roster. Like Drew McIntyre, for example, was unceremoniously dumped out the Royal Rumble by somebody who we're not supposed to believe is a threat to him. They didn't follow up on that angle, and now we're supposed to buy that he's a credible threat to multiple-time champion Roman Reigns going in to WrestleMania. Now, sometimes this just to do whatever they feel like approach works, but most of the time it really, really doesn't. Thus, with that in mind, when we see a decision like Asuka having to drop the title right before WrestleMania, thus burying her and seemingly killing off the entire women's division on that show, we think, oh, what another harebrained short-term idea. How annoying. But there's a twist here. The twist is that it's actually not that. This is one of the few examples of WWE thinking about the long term. Honestly. You see, they know that we will all remember these huge, iconic visuals at WrestleMania. Think about The Rock versus Hogan, the bit where they're turning around and looking at each other and looking at the crowd. We remember that, don't we? We don't remember that in the build-up, Hogan tried to kill Rock with a truck or a car or something, and that most of the promos were really, really bad. We remember the visual. The thing that's lasted, the thing that's built a legacy, the thing that helped establish both of these men as two of the most iconic figures in WWE, and that match is one of the greatest WrestleMania moments, is the stare down. And like even before that, we don't remember the really clunky soap opera role Deborah had in The Rock versus Austin, do we? We remember the heat of it, we remember the blood, we remember the handshake with the devil, we remember the iconic images, not the build. And now, as a result of last night, the potential closing image of WrestleMania 35 could be one of the most iconic in the company's entire history, no matter how cutely engineered it's been. Like, in years to come, we will not remember the cynical unease we felt about Asuka having to drop that belt when we think of that shot. We will remember the real reason for all of this, the sight of each of the four horsewomen holding their title in the air while they give their four-fingered salute with the other. We will remember WrestleMania 35 as the night that, after the long, long road it took to get there, women's wrestling in WWE finally ascended to genuine legitimacy, and Charlotte, Becky, Sasha, and Bayley will all benefit from that glow for the rest of their careers. And from there, it doesn't even matter what you do with them next. We can have a full summer of WWE going full WWE with nonsensical booking decisions and them just traipsing over this legacy and trotting it down into the ground. They will still be able to go back to that image of the four of them to restore any hope, any expectation, any excitement in whatever it is they're doing with them. That's how they work. And yes, I know people are saying that this will kill off the SmackDown women's division if in fact the two titles aren't unified after all of this, but have they? Like, I remember reading and even saying myself that they'd probably killed the entire division, the entire brand after Survivor Series, after Raw won in an absolute landslide, but I mean, look what's happened since then. Like, since then, the blue brand has absolutely dwarfed its counterpart in what it offers us every single week on TV. Rey Mysterio and Andrade are wrestling sublime matches that are completely opposite from the WWE norm. Kofi Kingston, for example, has ascended from a fun mid-carder to a legitimate super over WrestleMania title challenger. Daniel Bryan, his opponent, has put together one of the greatest heel champion runs we've seen in a goddamn cow's age. You've got Samoa Joe is still a joy to watch. The Miz is having one of the best runs of his entire career. Dead, that brand was, apparently. And while we might not agree with the decision, whilst we can all agree that Asuka deserves better than this, WWE is for once using a bit of perspective and looking forward to the future. And is that not what we keep saying we want them to do? Yes, it is. It is. Look, right, okay, Asuka versus nobody is bad, yes, but it's only marginally worse than Asuka versus a nobody in a match that nobody really cared about. Like, yes, she deserves way better than what she got on SmackDown last night, but she also deserves way better than whatever they were going to give her at WrestleMania, because that is a night where you can create a fundamental, long-lasting, era-defining image, and her retaining in a routine title defense is not that, but Charlotte being part of the Four Horsewomen image and them holding up all their belts is. And that is the real reason why they did it. So look, in closing, yes, this does suck for Asuka, of course it does, but if WrestleMania is meant to be the night where they let the women's division ascend as high as it can possibly go and they want us to remember it forever, then sadly this kind of had to happen. Didn't have to happen last night, didn't have to happen this way. They could have done way more with her if they thought about it ahead of time, but it's still a win, and a win is a win in WWE, especially when it comes to how they book women. But that's our take. I'm sure you've got loads of your own, so let us know about them in the comments below. And of course, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe as if you would by now. In the meantime, though, thank you so much for watching. Have, of course, been Adam Cleary. I'll see you soon. Bye.